Hey you, welcome back to the channel. And guys, today we want to discuss what we're going to get after Game of Thrones season 7 ends and season 8 ends. Are we going to get some type of spin-off Game of Thrones series? And it's seeming that there's definitely going to be a new Game of Thrones show, a successor show to Game of Thrones. But in some very interesting and maybe a little disturbing news, some articles, interviews from the man himself, George R. Martin, we found out that some of the contenders that we uh, may have thought might get done, uh, stories such as Robert's Rebellion, uh, Aegon's Conquest, the Blackfire Rebellion, the Duncan Egg series. Many of these candidates that were going to possibly be done, uh, you know, in some of George R. Martin's interviews, it's seeming like uh, they won't be being done, that they aren't good candidates. And in some of the interviews, some of the things he's speaking about is shows like what we got with the popular TV series Cheers, which then did a spinoff with the character Frasier, with the popular Friends TV series that did a spinoff show with Joey. And, both of these spinoffs, whereas some were actually quite popular, not all were as popular. And so, um, George R. Martin doesn't seem to want it to go this way. You know, as we know it, there are some major Hollywood writers involved with the new Game of Thrones show that will be coming out after Game of Thrones is totally concluded. Um, and Some of the reasons George R. Martin gave about some of our leading contenders why they won't be done, such as the Duncan Egg series. Part of it being that it's only 3 novellas that have been done, and that it wouldn't be enough material with the Duncan Egg series. Uh, you know, I think with Robert's Rebellion, um, some of the problems that George R. Martin stated had to do a lot with um, this familiarity with the same Game of Thrones story, and that's what's a little bit interesting at the same time, but a little bit concerning in that it doesn't seem like they may want the new Game of Thrones TV show to even be connected in a sequel sense to any of the Game of Thrones characters we know. So it may be going back to prequel, as many of us, have felt it might do. But the twist is because the world of Ice and Fire or the Game of Thrones world is so large. Uh, in some articles I've been able to find across the internet, and anytime we're finding stories like this with various quotes from people, it's always good to do your research, make sure. So these stories may not be 100% true, but George R. Martin does speak a lot, and this is why I think it's some substance to some of these particular stories, because George R. Martin does uh, and has said many times that the world of Ice and Fire is very large, and that he would love to do more writings about that world, but nothing to do with Westeros. And they're saying that he's saying a similar thing with this new TV show. So basically, that got me thinking about some various ideas for this next Game of Thrones show, based on many times George R. Martin has stated that he doesn't want this to be necessarily all his stories taking place in Westeros. So besides Westeros, what do we have? We have Essos, and we have some areas that are unknown in the world of Ice and Fire. And so what happened in Essos? Well, Essos has a very interesting, or going towards the east. We've seen a lot of it in the show. In the east, they deal a lot with the Dothraki, the Unsullied, which is familiar characters we've seen in the Game of Thrones world as they've come from east to west. But because it's a prequel series, one of the dominating cultures that I think might be interesting to tell a story on in the East was the Gascari. And during the rise of the Valyrians, who we know to be where the Targaryen line descends from, they had several wars with the Gascari, as the Gascari were the dominating forces. And to just give you an idea of who the Gascari successors were, or who they became, they eventually, the Gascari Empire eventually becomes the city and the people we've seen Daenerys take control of, and that was the cities of Meereen, Astapor, and Yunkai. And they became known as the Masters, and of course we got to see that in the Game of Thrones, show, how Daenerys hung many of the Masters, burned them alive, because slavery was a big part of their culture. They're responsible for creating the Unsullied soldiers. So, quite interesting. And if they don't want to do stories about Westeros in this new upcoming series, where, as I said earlier, they already have 5 big Hollywood writers to work on this. There are some interesting stories with the Gascari. It's kind of similar to, there was a series of about 5 wars, I believe, fought by the Valyrians, as the Valyrians pushed back east between the Valyrians and the Gascari. And these two groups had been warring for a long time until the Valyrians got the edge with dragons, and then they were able to pretty much wipe the Gascari out. The Gascari were almost totally wiped out, but again, they kind of became the cities of Meereen, Astapor, and Yunkai, and then they were able to preserve a lot of that Gascari culture and heritage, and name a new smaller area Nugis. So then you have Nugis, and so this is all very interesting because we don't usually get outside of Westeros, when we're dealing with this expansive world, the World of Ice and Fire series. So my guess is it is possible that they might go a totally different direction with the Game of Thrones series. Don't quite know how I feel about that, but if they got a really good story, I'm sure they'll have something well planned out that can hold the interest of the fans. And I'm sure they'll tie in some familiar things. I think we will continue to see the Dothraki. We'll continue to see elements of the Unsullied, and maybe a lot of politics that goes on in the East. There is quite a lot, guys, that goes on in the East. We know that Varys the Spider comes from the East, as well as Illyrio the Merchant. All these merchant princes, a lot of their culture, and basically a lot of what we saw with Dany's early story in the East trying to get to Westeros, and what were going on over in those lands pretty much details, another area of Westeros that they could focus on. Many of those cities, the free cities that they traveled to. So, they could create entire new characters that we're unaware of, that we're not familiar with. And I think that will be interesting. It is concerning because if that occurs, it won't be the Game of Thrones as we know it. There won't be a connective tissue with the noble houses of Westeros, so to speak, because I think the idea would be they're trying to get away with that. But that doesn't necessarily mean there won't be the Westerosis, people from Westeros who maybe travel from Westeros to the east, and maybe we could be looking at the experience of the east from their view, from their eyes. So, guys, that's all I wanted to say about what direction the new Game of Thrones TV series can take after season 7 and season 8. Let me know, guys, what you would like to see, what you think would be a good idea for the new show, keeping in mind, various things like budget, if there's something that called for many dragons. Like a lot of these prequel series exist at a time in the East and even in the West where we're talking maybe hundreds of dragons, several dozen dragons, 100 dragon riders at once. And that could be a very expansive and extensive budget. As well, again, to repeat, they may not do Robert's Rebellion. Doesn't seem like they necessarily want a direct tie-in to the story. We've gotten the last several seasons, what will be the last 8 seasons soon. And Aegon's Conquest actually looks pretty good, but then again, that would be about dealing with Westeros, which something's kind of telling me that George R. R. Martin hit a lot of hints in his comments that he wants to explore other parts of the world of Ice and Fire. So, guys, anyway, that's my comments about what we might get in the next Game of Thrones series after the 8th season. Guys, if you like content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, take care.